everything is Lunagi Jawa, and the Chibin, the Majinia, and the Susegi, Semlia, someone like called Medushin, that what is. Sandane, that Susegi, someone on the Pine, Nimbur, Yeva, Dead, Nimbola Chabi Chaba, and the Chi, Kushep Chain, Gudila Chabi Chaba, and the Susegi Damianda, the Chabi Chaba, in the Yohola Chabi Chaba Denegi, Donunia Yoba, on the Jik Yoba in the Samlatin Shub enough, and the Negi somebody want to dance your language, Chobadi, to your marriage, your marriage, and the Negi, some of you about how would you shake it, how could it, in Jamba digitally and Nimbo Danger, Lumaki, the somebody want to dance your Luma Jawa Michiba, change the new session.
Good evening. Part of the chapter we're looking at the moment is that it's on the motivation that precedes physical, verbal activities. To wake through vigilance, we notice the desire for material gain or to receive or be on the receiving end of respect or to have a great reputation or hoping to gain students or to have help us and assist us. Whenever this kind of or such a tainted motivation is noticed by vigilance, then immediately we should refrain from following such a motivation. We should not allow such a motivation to influence our physical and verbal behavior. That was a pretty strong summary of the first verse, which we looked at last time, and then in the 52nd verse, there, and the similar point was made, but in this time, but in this 52nd verse, it was when one's vigilance notices that one's motivation is either disregarding the needs of others, or when the motivation is self-centered, that we should rather remain like a log. In other words, when vigilance notices that our motivation is tainted, our mindfulness should recall that we should not follow such a motivation and rather remain steadfast like a log. Continuing from where we concluded last week with the verse in the same context, when impatient, lazy, or fearful, likewise impudent, speaking without shame, or a partisan attitude arises, at such times rather remain like a log. So this is the 53rd verse.
解脱上的下说下我说的身边例如啊，其实东岸的没学吧下的，你那个没学吧这样对，但点那个教完，也这边搞不了，但另外个点那个说公路了，什么拿了搞了好多，加上看到了没学吧的东岸的没学吧几个月吧，好过呢，他们说sem另外的地方个马当瓦切，另外可是sem地方的马当瓦切，这点嘞年不点起的，我的年不点我的也是去，清楚的，没学啥的。
First sign, the second word, impatience. So when impatience arises, in other words, when patience is lacking, then vigilance needs to be on guard and notice, and then mindfulness needs to be recalled and apply an antidote. Because when we are impatient, this means our mind is going to be frustrated, annoyed, or even angry. Patience is the very lack of patience, which means when it encounters something unwanted, whether it's from someone's acting towards us or what they're saying towards us, or from our own mental frustrations and afflictions, whenever the source, they're from an external source or an inner source, if we are lacking in patience, afflictions, particular frustration, annoyance, anger, even rage, these will arise. And they can arise in a number of circumstances. They can even arise in times when one could potentially be engaging in virtue. For example, when someone asks for assistance, we may well get up upstairs, thinking, if they keep asking me, they could do this themselves. They're just lazy, and our mind goes off in a negative direction. So there are a number of ways in which our afflictions can arise, and they arise due to a lack of patience. So again, as soon as our vigilance notices that our motivation is influenced by a lack of patience, and therefore afflictions such as annoyance or anger will arise, immediately mindfulness must step into action and recall an antidote, applying an antidote.
连络几把是的联络，其实他给予人们接把来经验嘛，就把没做啊，没做也什么的联络是有吧？的那个联络，的那个联络些联络有往给当然给为的那个接把那干了后的身边的那个几把刚刚这个身边几把解决我几把我的那刚刚这个上班呢，这是几把事情。其实他的那个什么哪里呀？给予教我去接把了，你没做为给他经验嘛对吧？你那个联络的使用吧。用个吧，点那个的来了往给当你提起吧，那刚刚这个的身边个，几把路用为点那个什么可为为呢？其实他第什么的我都打叫嘛的时候，他什么的呀有我会打叫嘛的来年不点些的什么的就是马当下钱年不点对是吧？我的也是，其实来了的往都打些当一些刚刚这个什么几把去点的打上吧，第往都打吧呢。今给人们这个把有罗这个嘛，人们这个嘛罗下些个，现在的那个什么种说那来了，他的那几块就有完呢，那好过那他们说的了呀，人不听，也是人不听见，那来了就往都马当话信心的对我也是。
The same way, we can be lacking patience and waiting an opportunity when we have an opportunity to engage in virtue and instead become afflicted. In terms of the next term, that of laziness, this also can arise in when one has an opportunity to engage in virtue. So when one has the opportunity to engage in virtue, it's all too easy for our attachment to self-interest to come up with excuses such as, oh, this is too difficult for me, or this will require too much effort. So these are expressions of laziness. They could also take the expression as a lack of enthusiasm, a lack of vigor that is required to engage in a virtuous activity, and rather one sits about distracted by something else. So laziness in this way, we get to see that it's a mind that serves as an impediment to engaging in virtue. It's a mind that lacks enthusiasm, a desire to engage, even if it means we need to push ourselves a little bit. So in vigilance, notices the presence of laziness in all, then again, a mindfulness is to apply an antidote.
Dene deshin chidul murjo dasede, chidu shedi, rangi jiwa lai ma yamlin chitu mare sembi shena kia chura dengi chitu mare sembi. Chisa lelo ki kiwi chawal chewala chik chini machuba samlo tang lelo kia da. Lelo ki da dengi chewen tinga kangan chiri chitu mare sembi sam daji ungura chikpa sede.
I'm just going to change the translation of the word fearful to maybe apprehension. Impatient days, you are apprehensive. Apprehensive, again, is a similar meaning for all three terms in that, or a similar situation, when one has the opportunity to engage in virtue, one is apprehensive, feeling, perhaps this is a bit too difficult for me, something beyond my capacity. And that apprehension then serves as an impediment. Virtue, that there too, but vigilance notices this, antidote needs to be applied.
Anda deshin chidu mujo tasidi, deshin na dang ju sam na le ya, chidu shehdi, chik jawa mayin ba chik ya, rangi pe jawa di jihel ya, and chik pe asori, uzu kaya da, dene ki chuk lor chimburo chin, chenen jihero chiche yorwa, dene chidu shehdi, dene chik ursido, chisan susugi jawa mayin ba, susugi ngewe jawa mayin ba, ane chige mege diba yonayage rashele nyoba yonayage denige jawa roche cheyage den cheya odadi o yinsha rache so suge nor imba hamo yinsha checha de yabu yorse so suge cheyage pe chi yidi che ture se lo keda denige uzo kege samlo chiyoba ina di cheyage denige samlo yoba ina an denige samlo di pa ai onto tachine yuanbe cheba chawa tigal to yomare chigyomares cheza di samatel tele nyembo tienche ane dushine ajaga di onto matanga to reswa.
Second line, likewise, impudence. So impudence, this in our context here, is when vigilance notices in our motivation an impudent attitude towards virtue or non-virtue, in the sense of a mind that actively excuses engaging in non-virtue, that it excuses one's non-virtuous inclinations, that justifies one's non-virtuous inclination, or an impudent attitude towards engaging in virtue, a dismissive, critical attitude towards engaging in a particular virtuous activity. So when we tell vigilance notices this kind of impudent attitude, either excusing our non-virtuous tendencies or being critical against or criticizing a potential virtuous activity, then we should apply an antidote.
The murjur se di dunda meba de megi kishi ala sobada denegi ane chige shele kato ala sobada twin sheba la soba denegi ajele denegi ursi do murjur se ali aje de megi kisha che nga cha du she de la denegi chisada murjur denegi shege samlo denegi she wasem samlo kun orubshi yoba ina denegi samlo on ta chen du shene on ta ba ina de kishiri du shene she ru gorwa chisa di samlo ondo matangwa che dendige sheyage kolong shuyeba hawa na namsa ane che shishin hawa na jamba yake nyembo ten che andi ondo matangwa che di matang kishi ma sheba che ane do shine shinshin de diyo re SS disu.
Further on the second line, speaking without shame. Here with our vigilance notices our motivation is tainted by maybe engaging in ill-considered chatter, maybe telling lies, maybe expressing pride, and the kind of ways of speaking where we do not have shame in the sense of the shame being a self-awareness of our behavior. When that is lacking, vigilance needs to be on guard to notice that, recognizing that we're engaging in impossible chatter, maybe telling lies or expressing pride. And at those times, we should rather remained silent.
On that rangi cho shen sim ju na si the rangi cho da rangi nye do ngi punja se da denegi cho ba ji chagwa ke ene shen jine chagwa de delia shen ba shu chen ba ke se du sin ye ba ina ye ba ha go na da denegi sam di cha dan she rang cho la cha bi ge cha shen di on do ba ja ba na sim di shu she cho de di kulun la de ne ba ge shen da shen ya chudu she la so ba de kun je ya la so an chi shen ji ne ba ji ya la so ba shen ji ne ji je ku an so ba na so ji yung ru wa lu ma bi che ba ta ma yung ru wa ne za ne ge sam no na la rang gi cho la shen be rang gi nye do pun ja de le ya ne ba cha wa ke ne ge cha shen shu shen bo ne gi yu ba ha ko na sam na ne yu ba ha ko ba na o lam sa an de le ya yin bo de da an ji ki di sem di on do ma da wa chi lu nga gi ja wa ka ya ma che ba che o do shen ne shen shu ne wo re sa chi.
But third line, partisan attitude writers, again, benevolence notices a partisan attitude in our motivation. So where we are partisan perhaps to our family, our loved ones, or maybe a group that we identify with, but we notice this bias in our motivation. Immediately, we need to address this. If we are unable to, we should refrain from allowing such an attitude to influence our speech or behavior, and rather not do anything, say anything under such a tainted motivation, or apply an antidote and free our motivation of such a taint. Because if we allow bias in our motivation, we end up choosing one side over another, and thereby we are likely to be pushing others away. So we need to, there again, by relying on vigilance, take care of our motivation and ensure is free from such taints.
That's done in the Munich, it in Anachig, Shipping Yamnichadi, Yamnichada, and the Tundri Yamnichadi, Mutu Shewada. And the garrison in that they say in a Shipping Yamnichaba, the Tundri Yamnichadi, Yada, Shivu Kumna, Shivu, some Tundri, some dire, and the Shiva Mukumbaina, and the D. Kenche, and Chicken Archuya, and Yomo Shuk Children, and D. Kenji, Lunga, Cheba Shan, and Nebe. 세와치 빌레가 용구요바 델라티네 한동아 용구요바 한도스네 삼다 남균네 아주게 도시네 삼다제 네 세보 팅이 샬리암 셴기 소르네바치 기벤 델리아파 네 콘롤레 레로메 삼비 삼다 고미아다 네 기위 차와투네 베카 베가신 드심 야고레 삼비게 삼 주야진 냠멜 제 야고레 삼비 삼다데 남균네 도스네 아주 베스위치 니치에체고 바 시사다 Dine za dang zu gi du xin ne jawa ru che bi ke lu ga ge jawa ka che bi ne ba ji nie li ya na su su ge sem li ya gu lo li ya ka ta ge yue ba dang bo se wu di ha gu bu le s ji sa gu lo la ta che ba ma che ba che an ji li ga che sha ba na ji sa di ge han gu lo ngan ba ru da nyo mo be gu lo yue de ba na di le ga no de chi mo xue gi ne na yo ba yin za an zu ka che bi ne dang bo da lu ga gi jawa ka che bi ne mi gi we da 안지 되미게 와도 마서 다 지게 개위 냠는 개와장야 주도야지 고거로 당도 다 tum지kin 비고 산지고 와도 봐나 제일심비 냠는 제발라 류가 저거 카리나 개위기 자와지 줘도 봐지 고거로 디네 인자 아마저 당번에 류가게 줘발이 개위 참 자와지 마도 봐지 셴야 채와다 강아지에 동아지에 차베나 한지가 지 류가게 줘발이 야고 송도 고 말봐 Tene zata anze kiwi dunga cha ma jin yele da bo so so samna kunwa kar chi sam tai de o dine ge ta mi se ba da ani le lo ke de ba da an chi ge de ne ge an chi de ma yin ba chi la yi che gu u su che ge sam lo ye ba da an chi de na mi bi ge dine ge ke she ge dine kunwa ro cha dine ye de ba na ra cho la shin bi ge sam lo de ye de ba na sam sa ha go de o de le ya chi da ku de le ya some of the on the party there I am much of a do send did or less or changes. I am much of a deal or less some do on the mother to or less. The nimble thing could not nimble data, Tigo to nimble care, nimble dare chair. Nimble the modern not good Tigos, Yakamachi chair. You want the mother to send Desha or less, and Desha when a music asm Jilia some of the Kuno de Maishido.
That cannot make officers of the then for their reason that they are cheap as some that all your young and young is up that she build up with folks the high. But then it's some teaching.
That is so what I send you and that's as I never demo or that she done in your dead and in the common or as a shura. I did the language did Chasadi Radam, Chasai to Deniga gender, that Deniga Yimbotin to the Yimbotin, Yimbotin, Lagamajas Dusens, Sem Dio, Kuno Dio on the Dutch, Chow Machiva Dio, or less or what.
West folks, so the purpose of the section is to encourage us to take care of our motivation before we physically do something or we state something to ensure that our motivation is virtuous, ideally conjoined with bodhicitta. And so through vigilance, if we notice a fault, we need to apply an antidote. So there are a vast number of antidotes that can be applied. We could think of some of the faults that have been mentioned here, such as impatience or laziness or apprehension. Amongst the many antidotes that can be applied, cultivate joyous perseverance. To cultivate joyous perseverance, think about this incredible opportunity that this life presents and how that within our hands, we have the very capacity to live a life of great need. And to cultivate that joyous perseverance will come. Likewise, to not want to developing an attitude of valuing others and not wanting to harm them, then a joyous perseverance, wanting to be of benefit wherever we can, and a joyous perseverance to encouraging us to refrain from any activity that will cause harm, even if we are pushed towards that activity, that awful activity, by the power of our habituation, of our negative habituation. So by cultivating the various qualities of the path, valuing us, wanting yourself and others to be happy, wanting to live a life of great meaning, one develops an enthusiasm to engage in virtue and an enthusiasm to turn away from non-virtue. With such an enthusiasm, that one's hardships and challenges that one had encountered on a daily basis, these will not overwhelm. Moreover, you'll be able to skillfully transform them. So therefore, rely on vigilance. And as soon as you notice an affliction such as these to others, immediately apply an antidote of choice, an antidote that you are habituated to or skilled in. And if nothing comes to mind at that time, then remain like a log. The meaning of remaining like a log is do not follow the tainted motivation. Do not act or speak under a motivation that is afflicted. Rather, refrain from doing anything. This way, remaining like a log.
That the Luigi Laba Minyamba Song said the Song Song watch. Just a Luigi Laba Minyamba said the Luigi Laba the Carasana, Laba Mazin, Yamlen Chair the Carasana, and the Lunga, Luigi Gone, and the Chica Chair, and it's a sort of Machimba Lemba, and the Chiloyam Nasoba Chair and Nasoba, the Ching Mea Sembe Soya did that. Luigi Gone never Soya, but that was the Miguel Jusoya the Song order. And that did that Miguel Jusian. And the Luigi Gone Miguel Sunigro, Socheva, Machimba Lemba, that chicken, Chimba in that, and the Royam that, he may be that. When there was a in that Miss Ojo or La Soba, or they do Shongorua. This was Soya, this Luigi when the Soya. Now you're going to Chama, Sisu, Nakia Shidua, Sonia Shidua. Cesar di Soya, this Sungu. Cesar, Luigi Gone, Kasa Kuma Kuba in that. Kuma Laba, Luigi and Lab Soya did the Yam Urba. That Luigi Gone and the Soja and Soja Soya did the Yam Urba. Now you're going to Yisheva in 军送啊，的年度吧，就是的，米给我具体，米给我具多少的，给我具体的话，他旅游过呢，给我具有的话，他旅游过呢，哪里给我写的，以给我写的，写送去给我捐的，另外给我捐的，按这个年数了，年数给我足够了。其实你原来嘛年把那个年写的，你多少的。 제가 있는데 님 개발 송투가 완냠도 걸어봐 님고 제가 디 만냠 바지 송보고리 해서지 송 제가 다 송다 그래 송고래라나 저기 때나 거네 진 참아 치수 마체체 야디 삼로 꿀로 니호되는 아주 하고 내가 시도 꿀로 매매나 꽝아 거네 진시하다 티브치하다 참아 디 나케디 용고 매반자다 안에 그런 것은 나보 삼론 봤다는데 삼론 안에 꿀로로 붙이 진시리 꿀로 여바이나 then judging out when it's share that. And it's to share Kuno Yobana, then it's to share that. And then Nakia da to make share Kuno Yobana, Nakia di Chagua. She said, there you use part, meaning to Yoba, meeting by Kisha or some Kuno Yoban, Tama said, Chamache, some Kuno Yobana, then it Tim Gorba. Then is that Abo Kuno did do some die. She's not Kuno, and then Chicken Gula Chapa Chapa, you know. Ningola Chebe Chapa in the Ningola Chapa Rag, Dundala, Nana Damara Sigro, Jinda Marata, and Jig Damara Share Chunguro, Denegi, Kortaya La Sobada, Denegi, Jafan Shia La Sobada, Denegi, Nasotion Sira. Chisa Dini is a Samnonalia, Ningola Chapa Dui Mindu, Kola Chapa Dui Mindu, and Denegi, and Jig Chapa you met, and the Rachola Chapa, Samla Dene Kumodi. Chisa Dundala Kumodi Yomo, but Denegi. Want to hear by the Lamsa, and you got Yambotin to it, is some done Yambotin to it. Yambot Motovan could do the Yambotin to Calafo in the court Kaya, T want to touch like a Majeva Chanzuki, that some of you want to touch your Lugacha or Machevache, do she change and near what is that, and the night is soon with other.
Further way that this can be understood is you take the 10 non-virtuous actions. There are those of the body, not to cut that of killing, that of stealing, or sexual misconduct, and those of speech, lying, divisive speech, harsh speech, and speaking for of no particular purpose, or idle speech. So these are the fundamental non-virtues that we need to refrain from, because that only lead to accumulation of causes for suffering. And the way to refrain from them is to understand them and to develop a determination not to engage in them, firstly, and then secondly, to take care of our mind, because one only engages in physical or verbal non-virtue if one's motivation, one's mind, is non-virtue. If we bring together what we're looking at the moment, the Davian teachings, and beyond this chapter on our vigilance and mindfulness, be aware of our motivation. And as soon as we see a motivation that is going to lead to a non-virtuous act of the body, such as to kill, steal, or engage in sexual misconduct, or one of speech, lying, divisive speech, harsh speech, or speaking for no particular purpose, then we need to have vigilance and recognize this, mindfulness then needs to remind us this is not how we should be acting. This is not the person I've committed myself to be. And rather than apply an antidote, there are a number of antidotes that are taught, and many of them can be applied in a variety of situations, but where one notices that one is wanting to engage in one of the non-virtues of body or speech, one can call to mind the opposite virtuous action. Those are the 10 non-virtues, and they're opposites of the 10 virtues. And they are the practices of refrain from engaging in that non-virtuous behavior. So one, through mindfulness, can recall the benefits of refraining from engaging in a non-virtue, and rather re-strengthen our commitments and to not do that physical action or speak in that none. So in this way, we can apply a straightforward antidote of refraining from engaging in non-virtue. And again, if nothing in the moment comes to mind, remain like a lock. Rather, restrain, stay silent, stay still, and do not engage. And in this way, at the very least, one refrains from engaging in non-virtue. But it's not only that one is doing, one is strengthening one's vigilance and one's reliance on vigilance and mindfulness in one's restraint from non-virtue. And this is an excellent skill, an indispensable skill to be developed.
Nala di kasu da so di kasu persumor sa nyeje de me surim soya di je sungor wa nyeje de me surim sungor re sa de na zo ge a je sembi gi je ba sanji ko ma to ba la je sem ge ne je ba sem di go ma je sem je ba paro chim ko la bo re yes en za da je sem je ba paro chim la ya da dang bo chim bi nyam le la ya da su ri ye par chim la ba ya de sungor wa je za de chim bi nyam le la ya de ji ga la ya da na kap so para le sungduwa. Ene, ade, sheshin di kausu tsuringi labala, tsuringi nyamlen chayade sungorwa da. Ene zata tsurim nyamara chayan sundu da, tsurim soyade lunga isi nyeche timbe tsurim zade. Da nganjoge, kasore tsurim dila, nyeche timbe tsurim, ane kewa chudigi tsurim, semja dojege tsurim zade, chansimbe tsurim soyade la denege sumyorwa. Zina dadi nyeche timbe tsurim zade soyage sungorwa. Chaza nyeche timbe tsurim zade nyeche di lunga yisumye nyeba di domya tsu. Bende nga kuni tuishe ya domba, tuishe ime tse kaya domya tang. An tsiksu nga cha, ane di o chike sunya kaya, yi lu yu kone so chupa da ma chimba lemba. Ane chike oyam la sopa tu sunya di che. Nga yu wane, tatim nasa nisum lokta la sopa sunya dirwa. Dini za, di sungbo za, da dini ki, da zo lu yu kone sunya she yondu, dini ki, da lunga ki, ane leba songa mi nyamba songa la ya de jizada lunga ki yije de mi songa la jizada na la la songa la sene lu ko ne nga ko ne jun chama ti do nga cha de songa ko res de songa ko res de lu ju ko ne anen ga so re so che ba de ma chen ba le ba ne lo ya la songa ko res da di jizada di yo ya de kan de songa ko res ne dan jun di ro chen na lo la sam lo ku lo ro chone sa tangbo kuno di che, kuno di wangi lunga yu, lunga ki chawa le yung ores. Ini enzang nga zuge tangbo kuno pa samlo na ta ino kuno le kar nyomo ba dini ke nyingo la chakwa ki yoba na chakwa di wangi dini nga hana pa kisi tamara shead. Dini ke andi chike ko raya ki tablam dili ya tamara shead yoro tun shead kabla tun shead chike ungurwa, dini ke ungurwa, dini ke andi chike kuno ya pasho la ma kewe ki chiki nevi sambar chiba nilamsa anya tsiru chaya de gyunju chaya la soba yungurwa anya jing daga tunda mebe samlo chi tun megi chiki kohar teya ki din kishira shaya zin ina nga kya sili gurwa nga kya leo de bini aada jiga zuge de tunda meba de tishimi tine shiorwa de tichido si dinba konzi lega lega dugan si ji digun nasa dini shaya yungurwa de shisa ini nga kya tili yungurwa sila dini yeza tunda la nga ju kunlo na ya samlo dini ji karagar kodu du cheba cheje samlo dini ki rikchi kogu inu nyomo berik dini ki kogu yubana amsa da samlo di ondo taji lunga ki chawa di di tak ma cheba chi diyo kore esa danda diri dwa taji lunga yeche timbe surim sungda di sungwa danda diri dwa.
This chapter that we're on, the chapter of vigilance, is contained the Shantideva's presentation of the perfection of ethical restraint. And where we are now and have been for a number of weeks since the 34th verse, so we're now on the 53rd, is within the first of the three categories of the Bodhisattvas of the perfection of patience. The perfection of patience has three arts. We are in the first, that of the ethics of refraining from misdeed. This will later, I think from 59th verse, be followed by the second, the ethics of accumulating virtuous qualities, and later will be followed by the ethically striving to benefit scientific. So these are the three types of ethics, or the three divisions of the perfection of ethics. So the method by which we, as a practitioner, engages in the perfection of ethics requires relying on vigilance and mindfulness. Hence, it presented this is the presentation of ethics. So the Bodhisattva will lump sum have developed that determination to refrain from non-virtuous and acts, physical acts and verbal acts. And this too we need to commit to. So for ourselves, striving in the 10 non-virtues is the ideal place to start. So for the Bodhisattva, they will also abandon the 10 non-virtues, and they'll do so with the motivation conjoined with bodhicitta. For ourselves, we reflect on the faults of engaging in the physical non-virtues of killing, stealing, and sexual misconduct, and the verbal non-virtues of lying, harsh speech, and divisive speech, and pointless chatter. And we reflect on the faults of engaging in such harmful behavior in terms of the negative karma that will result for ourselves and ripen in lives to come, as well as suffering that will follow for ourselves in this life, and then the impact that has on others in this life and in lives to come. We engage in this reflection to develop the deep determination to abandon these as non-virtuous behaviors. So this is important. I need to learn what these non-virtues are and reflect on them, so one has a deep revulsion towards them. And that revulsion will serve as the impetus not to engage in that. And how does that impetus get energized? When vigilance notices our motivation to, say, speak, it's and with wanting to express a lie or to deceive someone or engage in harsh speech and so forth. When vigilance notices that, independence on our prior meditation, or say rather, our mindfulness will then call on our prior meditation, and that revulsion of such non-virtuous behavior will need care of it. And with ease, we will refrain from talking badly about someone, but to someone, and so forth. And so for us, this is a training very much within our capacity and indispensable. And in particular, one does so with the motivation that this is my foundation. Through this foundation of ethics, we have to develop all the qualities that are required to actually generate bodhicitta in this life and to become an actual bodhisattva. So for us, this is how we can engage in this first training of ethics of the bodhisattva, the ethics of refraining from misdeeds. So again, this process involves coming to understand what is non-virtuous behavior and to reflect on the faults of non-virtuous behavior for oneself and others in this and lives to come, and develop a deep revulsion towards such non-virtue, and then also rely vigilant, watching our mind, ensuring our motivation before we physically do something or we say something. This thing is how we can engage in the ethics of retraining from misdeed.
Venerable Lobsang Dorje Songyödu in the social body in the social be Migewa said the Migewa said Geshe the Dambola, Chesa de Migewa de la Migewi Lam said Tobatilla Perborsen, and she Samba Chua Tarduk said she Napan she Sung Tua. Jedada she Joa Samba said in Ala Geshe de Samba de la Guloda, Dusheda, and Yomoba said Sung Tua. Jedada Simjian Soji, Yomoba de la Karimusan, Duesha Kondo, Ning Marik Plus Ungre said. Jezada, Soji, Yugi Soji, Jawajebola, Yomo want to chine, and Soji, Yomo de Caresina, than was some Nalia, and then Duesha on the Su, the Sugar, Duesha Kiri, Duesha Kennedy, and you teach in the Serba Jawajuba, and no Kondo there's the name Gaya, Mashigo Mombi on the Serba, the English, the Yomo Bona. Jezada, Lam Nana Song, Jezade, sheep soldier, and do somebody like Yakunota, do share the Yomo, says Song, Jezad Yomo, but the only said the Sugar rest, Yomo, but the Deja Condonas of yours, Song, Jezad, Denis Moore, Jezada, this soon that Jezada, do you so Jibe Chawachebala, nearly some other Yomo to kill Woodwa. Jezad Yomo, but the key was it, you were arrested in Songwa. Indeed, that GBT Yard, Amajubi, said Dambo, that's not that just Mirachegorova. Adambo as some not Yomo case, Yomo only, Yomo Desha Condo, Majana Soba, Yomo Banda, so you carry Yungubena. Says a Yomo, but you won't give you a Chawa Chuyungre, says a Yomo, but you want to, you have a how go you, Yomo, but you want to Matan a chair, that kind of match about you, Shinji, Nimbo 10 12 quarter, Nimbo 10 modern, Shinji, and much of you do send the over said, Suntaro, the Sungo, and the Tanda. The Minnesota suit the Nachibacha or
For those of you who are coming to the Lama teaching on the weekend, where with presentation right now is common. you'll see the crossover between these two teachings, that the presentation from Shantideva and Lama Tsongkhapa are entirely harmonious, the one building on the other, the two interacting in a complementary manner. And for example, last time we looked at the non-virtuous actual killing, and that this, like all of the 10 non-virtues, is presented with four parts: that of the virtues, so context killing, to who the killing is the form. Then there is that of the intention, then third, the performance, and finally completion. So of those four, the one of intention has three further subdivisions: that of motivation, differentiation, and affliction. So their affliction is presented as either attachment, anger, or ignorance. Where out of attachment, perhaps to gain financial to what kills. Out of attachment, because one maybe wants to sell the meat or sell the fur, or one wants to eat. Or out of anger, what kills. Or out of ignorance, what kills. For example, the ignorantly thinking that there's nothing wrong in killing. So we see there the role that the central role that the afflictions play in the non-virtuous activity of the body. See, and how does one then guard against having a motivation influenced by the afflictions? As Shantideva is presented here, with vigilance, we watch our mind, and we watch our mind at all times. And as soon as vigilance notices the presence of an affliction that is going to influence our motivation and thereby lead to non-virtuous verbal or physical behavior, immediately rely on mindfulness to recall that you don't apply an antidote, or at the very deep to remain like a lock.
I didn't go ya, didn't get that. You Java Yambala Song said that the share is Mong Tarmung Song Savashia Shu, and I think that's true. Door doing it, Dom Jamna, the Sungar Denma. Later, Gune, your more dang, the Merchant be ye dane, they say Bowie, Nyemboyi, and then it Tembo Song Jazz.
That Shantideva has presented a number of verses, 6 or 7, about taking care of one's motivation prior to or analyzing one's motivation prior to physical verbal activity. And these were the verses presenting that one should rather remain like a log. Now comes a summary verse, so first to summarize what is being presented here, the 54th verse. In that way, this thoroughly afflicted mind that strives in pointless endeavors is examined. At these times, by means of courage and antidotes, I will hold my mind firm.
rangi yi semle ya andi chik tangbo lunga gi jawa ma jinye la so so ge samlon ba ta samlon ta ne andi dine gi chik jawa te dan di jawo simbi kunye kunlong kunye nyomo ba chik kunye la ju nyomo ba ke de ba yo ba na su kunye nyomo da nyomo ine a chik danda me bi jawa la zunbi ge da chik ra shin ni ga la phan mo do ba ke dine gi nam yang ge jawa la zue je ya ge dine gi de bige samlo chi sheba ina ane dene ge daji dene yoba hago na an di se ane chige bawe nyembo yi dene tenpo songla cha se dene ya ane nyembo ten che ane nga zuge sem kulo nyembo ba jiso wando ma tangwa che ane chige sem di ba nyembo shido ma tangwa songto ba chi kukore ese shi songoro wa
Kune nyong da kune sena.
你现在是过年浪走了的，过年浪走了，好的。过年赛的过年浪呀，我的对的那把过年赛的，我的对的那把过年给第一呢赛的，我罗的，俺的有过了是过了明年过年赛就过了的的，那等好像在就是呢，过年浪哇赛加上有的话。
And this don't change motivations, definitely. the translation of the first line. In that way, this afflictive motivation that strives in pointless endeavors is examined. So in that way, refers to these number of verses before that in which Shantideva has presented a number of ways in which, or a number of circumstances that we need to examine our motivation. So when we're talking about whether attachment is arising, anger is arising, or one's overly excited, proud, or haughty, so these were prior verses, or as we saw last week, it one's desiring material gain or respect, and whatever it may be, or one's motivation is particularly so interested. So in various ways, our motivation can be afflicted. And in the ways that have been presented in these prior verses, one needs to examine one's mind, because that motivation will lead us to engage in pointless physical activity or verbal activities. Pointless in the sense of they are not taking us closer to our goal of fulfilling the aim of the Bodhisattva. So in this way, they are pointless in that they do not serve the purpose of the Bodhisattva, that's to Bodhisattva. So we should examine our mind in that way, in the way presented earlier. There are these various verses that Shantideva has been presenting actually here. They show various expressions of the afflictions. So this can be the mind being drawn to attachment or towards anger, or when one's pride is arising, when one wants to criticize others, or one's mind is complaining about others, or one is that it's more of an expression of pride, where one is thinking oneself is greater than others, or whether self-interest is dominating. Whatever the expression may be, we need to rely on our vigilance to notice it. And when we do, lie antidotes. This is the third line. At these times, whenever vigilance notices the presence of an affliction, by means of courage, we add antidotes our old mind firming the third and fourth line. And the meaning is, the previous verses gave many illustrations of the way the afflictions influence or change our motivation. And the reason for presenting all these examples is so that we can come to recognize, however the afflictions appear in our heart, we should never accept them or justify them, but rather always be courageous and refrain. Courageous because it can be very easy to rather do. It can feel quite natural to do what is easy for us, what we are habituated to. But we need to be courageous and refrain through applying an antidote. So in brief, whilst there have been many verses mentioned thus far, these are just giving illustrations to show the subtle or the best variety of ways the afflictions arise. But in brief, in whatever way the afflictions arise, tainting our motivation, be courageous and rather apply antidotes, and do so in a consistent way, holding your mind firm.
Desi pawo nyimbo yisiri, so that these says, the niggy cheba chiche, rangi koloria, and yomo batan, to make it chawache, kuno samba tinshua by your how could Chayipo, see the power to use some by Shendin Chebala, pay Shindone, Nindo Yudican, Geshe Semba Po Geshe Semba de Yigi Delia Lamsa Nyomo Bodile Nyebo Tenje Di Wando Matang Aje Nyebo Tenje Rangi Lisem Yao Tembo Sonche Nyomo Dio Nyomo Wando Matang Aje Nyebo Tenje Tembo Son Tua Jiao Jiao SS Dise Po Nyim Po Nyimbo Po Sede Geshe Semba and then Shenren Jeba Nindo de Temba Po Geshe Semba de Zugi Nyebo Ten rangi sem di nyomo pa di wang tu ma tang wa che liu ngang ki jia wa li nyomo pa di wang tu ma tang wa che tenpo sung kwa es sung wa cha kwa le es.
The word, so in English, we always use the word bodhisattva. If one word translate that into English, it would be mind, hero, or courageous mind. So that is the source of this term in the third line, courage. It's just, courage is the second part of the word called bodhisattva. So therefore we can, further way we can understand this third line is like a bodhisattva, which is a practitioner with a courageous mind. So a courageous mind, again, could be an English translation called hero, called bodhisattva. So like a bodhisattva, when at these times, when an affliction is noticed, apply an antidote. And the final line, I will hold my mind firmly. So this shows a diligence, the consistency in applying oneself or applying antidotes to the rise of affliction, a consistency in not allowing one's motivation to be overwhelmed by the affliction.
Da bao ye nyimbo timba yi se de nga zu da wo la cha wa na da nga zu ning do pye che ning do pye wo re so de ne ya de ne ye nyimbo de ning do pye cha de pa chi ning do pye che be se che che da nyimbo de ya da o do sem di wa do yi sem yong mo ba di wa do ma da wa che yong ga che ba di wa do ma da ma che tian po song to ba che wo le se shi jong lo.
So further, that need for courage, or this term courage, points to a need for us to develop an inner confidence by striving in these teachings, with actively recognizing the development in one's mind, that one's growing skill in turning away from the affliction. Develop a courage, because having a courageous mind will make it much easier to strive in developing further good habits and letting go of past non-virtuous habituation.
Da bao ning do se de na nga zu lo qin bo lo che go lo qin bo se de lo qin bo ne ni xian yi ren shen ba di ni xian den che ba la che tu gre san bi ge da ji ge yo ro da xian na me ni che tu gre ji ge san bi ge da ni ji ge xie chu tu gre ji ge san bi ge sam lo shu ro da ning do ro da bao ro wa che za de ne ge shung bao ning do se de xie xian ge tuen che ba le ya pe che남이야 같이 투불에 이 지기 셈게 되는게 삼로들 인도식으로 보고서 디스로 와 당연히 야디치 아다가 갈래 지치 투는 갈래 가그래 용어 말에 셈게 디지 인도 메바 차그 디로와 저는 인도가 보고서야디 로침보서야디 임진대가 저기 지야 마자라 아다가 수야라 지야라 셴의 메스베 지셰 지야 조로와 디로디 디 long when you reach a yoma, long when you said, oh, said, when you're a shay to other, yomo palia, shanam never, and teaching it to put a sembigi, into virtuating in dela, the poem Lord Chimbo as Shagor. The Lord Chimbo only didn't you sympathy, it's word, just I get and sympathy. GK Shan two weeks, then Shan Suya, Big Shanam, Betching each to a church or what they pesore that ma she be won't be lo chimbo de chagor da
English, and I said English for bodhisattva, the confident mind. This is this translation that perhaps it's good to bear in mind, because the bodhisattva has great confidence. And another way to express confidence is a strength of mind. To not confidence, they have great courage. The bodhisattvas have great courage, or a courageous mind, not confident mind, a courageous mind. And they are courageous because they believe that they can do this. This is something that we should try and call to mind when we are presented with an opportunity to engage in virtue, but we feel an apprehension. So it's usually translated as fear, but maybe an apprehension. We withdraw ourselves, feeling ourselves too small, not good enough, something beyond us. But we rather than need to call to mind the courage of a bodhisattva, recognize that we can do these teachings, or that they created the causes to encounter these teachings, which shows the tremendous capacity we have. These teachings are rare and precious in our world, and that we have created the causes to meet them shows the tremendous capacity we actually have, even though we largely do not recognize the courage that is referred to of a bodhisattva is very different from how the word is used in society. In society, someone is considered courageous if they're going into battle or into some form of physical conflict. This is not considered courageous. This is just following the picture. For such people, it often is the easier route. What is a lot harder is to stand up and say no to what is easy and rather to do what you know to be right. This can be more challenging. We need to take this courageous heart to heart and use the bodhisattvas, our role models, as inspiration, that we walk in their footsteps. We fulfill our capacity, and we help wherever we can, embrace every opportunity of virtue.
Semki laba menya basonga se chagortin ma shede yuji laba lunga di laba menya basonga de ya shu sa den ma da semki laba menya basonga se de hegor edin ma sidila shindu nge da rabje da tena gui da xie ser je wa cha xie da ne ji che da xi xi shan la shan ga jia war zhen jie la zhen.
That concludes a sub-outline that we've been looking at for a while now, analyzing the motivation of the mind at the time of engaging in activity. So now we continue to look at protecting the mind through relying on individual antidotes. So we come to the 55th verse, and this has a number of points: definite conviction, absolute faith, steadfast, respectful, as well as delight, a sense of shame, apprehensive, along with calm and striving to make others happy.
Sada semgi laba lapside da jang sigurwa da lapside jaya di sigurwa da la lopsine da lapside de jaya sigurwa da semgi lab karlawya di karlawarsne jimbe nyamne lapside jimbe nyamne lapside semgi jimbe nyamne je hono da garwa jimbe nyamne je de jimbe nyamne lapsigurwa da chule nyamne labya ne surse ba tunde samde sherap ene nyamne laidi da nyamne je de la semgi du je de la nyamne laba lapsigurwa laba seda labye yuri karesene jimbe nyamne jimba surse ba tunde samde ene sherap da parchen rukti chagurwa rukti che and dele ya da so semgi lab ko ta de lab se de semgi di nyamsu len chagurwa da chesadi nyamsu len de le and manyam ba sung wor se de ta nyamsu len go wor se ko da manya len go wor se sung wor da da de ne de za da ka ze dang bo di shindu nge dang se de da nyamsu len ba la dang bo nyamsu len gi jimba di ge ane 체좀 다 도고매 봐 차사 신도 야고 하고 그래서 왔다 하고 그래서 하고 그래서 배는 아주 냠는 기회 냠는 가르치 집에 있네 제기 되고 주변에 당보 냠는 제기 좀부터 차사 한지 야고 하고 거야 냠는 제기 즉 될이야 도보다 체좀 되게 봐 매봐 제 따다 매봐 하고 싶고 그래서 신도 매봐 세대 냠는 가르제베네 냠는 가르제베네 제기 유디 대 체좀나 도범미바 내바야고 하고 싶고 그래서 냠는 제 고름 짐바르제 냠는 제 디리에서 차상 야고 하고 그래서
the section starting with this verse. That's called protecting the training of the mind from degeneration. So training the mind for the Bodhisattva means training in generosity, before restraint, patience, joyous perseverance, concentration, and wisdom. So those are the about 6 trainings, 6 actions. So how does one protect the mind from degeneration? So these are the 6 trainings, and each of them trains one's mind in generosity, trains one's mind in ethic, strength, one's mind in patience, and so forth. So all of these trainings, all 6 of these trainings, are to do with training the mind. It's not a physical activity, it's the mental activity. So we need to therefore protect this mental activity, so that the training of the mind, from degenerating. How to protect the mind from degenerating are these 9 points in the steps. The first of which, in the first line, definite conviction. The definite conviction being, having definite conviction in a particular training, whatever it may be, it comes from a detailed or a thorough understanding of that topic, where one has studied the topic well and knows that the various points of the topic, the sequence of how to train one's mind, and one knows this without any confusion. In other words, it comes to a detailed study so that there's no confusion in one's mind at all. Know the details well. That will lead to having a definite conviction in that topic. You won't be with any doubtful qualm, wondering how it's done. Is it possible? Can I do it? And so forth. You will have definite conviction in how to do so.
And now the Jamdro sometimes Yamnichi sometimes Chisada Tambo, Japsutraki, Jamdu Yuji, Yapahua, Chilako, or Jamdu Yu said how and Jamdaki, Japsutraki, Yudi, how never. Chisada di Yawaha education, Chisada Jamdo said, San you conjure sign the in a minute and Doba said, conjure in a minute and Doba Savana, and then Jamdo Tata de two Marva. Yaji Hamo, they take Sanjay said you conjure your mother Lokaro Jedevina, Yaji Jamdo Yawong tomorrow. Then Jamdo Yawo Yamlin Jeva some in the Jamdo Tambo Jefsum de Yambasan you can show you which said it more to Yabahawa Che. Then Jamdo Chevala, Jamdo Gudi here, got a kind of Dambo Karat some town with this Hawa Che. Then Jamdo Winnie do said it DJs and be Hawa Che in it. To Gamble to Yamsnichi or Essage, tis a desire of me ever said to Cambridge or Essa, did the Gamble shed. In there, Judge Sim, some Bakum, some Dabina, that Judge Sim said, and we care Jimba, and Nietzsche, Nichela, so we came to school, or a chess and tell it in that Judge Sim said, the condition of the Dinichi, some of the Dinichi, Judge Sim Lagore, Judge Sim give me body, and Lucine, and when she Sanji commanded, Toba Duvachi, race and be Dinigi, never how go watch it. Some of the Dikin Kumma, the Hamona, and said simple to Omar. That the Nigi, Kang Yamlin Chegi, and what Che Yudi, watching Yaba, how watch it, tell it, tears them down, lot order, the Meva switch and the Yabo never, how watch and Yamlich or Essage. Cheba, Dabo, Che or Gish Mores or the deal, Tambo, the Shin Yadam said.
They give some illustrations to make this term definite conviction clear. This refers to definite conviction in a particular training, which comes about through understanding that training well. If you think of, say, training in refuge and protecting refuge. So first thing, one needs to know what are the 3 objects of protecting refuge: the Buddha jewel, the Dharma jewel, and the Sangha jewel. And then come to know their various qualities, the qualities of each of the 3 jewels. So one understands one understands clearly what is meant by the 3 jewels, by each of the jewels, and what makes them suitable to turn to for protection from suffering. Moreover, one also needs to understand the causes of refuge, those causes that need to be cultivated so that one does turn to the 3 jewels for protecting refuge. By knowing these about the steps in the training and knowing thoroughly so that there's no doubt or confusion in one's mind, then one will have definite conviction about this topic. And again, not just merely intellectually, but will know how I myself can train it. and the benefits of doing so, the faults of not doing so, and thereby have given rise to a strong wish to do so. And another illustration would be in terms of bodhicitta. This is if one develops definite conviction in bodhicitta, then one will come to understand well what is meant by bodhicitta. So we'll understand that it has the two aspects of, in order to benefit all sentient beings. In the first, I will become Buddha. In order to lead all sentient beings to a state free of suffering, I will become a Buddha. That needs to know. One needs to know what are the various stages of training so as to generate compassion. One needs to know what are the prior stages, the preliminary practices for even the stages of bodhicitta. And this comes down to understanding what is meant by suffering and its origins, and that how one goes about gaining freedom from suffering. Independent of those preliminaries, one then needs to know the steps to training in order to generate compassion and then bodhicitta. So all of this needs to be known very well, so that in the doubts or confusion in one's mind, then one will give rise to definite conviction in relation to bodhicitta.
Adina Shira, the Jimmy Yamlin, the Jimmy Yamlin Chevala, and Zata Chimba said it, war Penichina versus Semba Chimba. Chimba said it, Tony Yamlet, Chimba de Tony Semba de Air. Chisato is Semba Horan Chimba de Share, Tama, Diag, Tie, to get a Chimbi Tie, and the Chimba Tie, you said, on those in how watch it in it, Chick Delia, and how when it in a round Semdi, that only Semba. community chagor ba chese dine za da tong sembe chi menyam ne je ba na chi menyam ne di ane chi ba ngo ti ya wa wa che ta chi bi ki che da chi bi ngo ti ha wa che wo re ine ki nge ba che nge ba yi wo ye sa chung wo
The training in generosity. Yeah, one understands that it comes to the types of generosity, the different ways that one practices generosity, so the three divisions. But more importantly, one comes to understand the entity of generosity. In other words, what it is, and that is the mind of giving. It is not necessarily a physical act, which may be a misunderstanding, a common misunderstanding. But one needs to know clearly that which the training in generosity means training the mind in wanting to give.
Oh dear. Then raptie dang sidu jesam delia Bendigo ina Chisago Josum Nyamsilimba Delia Deva Kores, Deva Rabdu Dawa, Rabde Dang Sida Rabdu Dawi Deva Tembo, and Dele Jonah, that Delia, and Chico Kunjosumye, Moan, how with Simming Ebenibitone, and the Deva Keva and Rabdu Dawi Deva Siwore, or how poet, Tenigi Dachi Deva, a Kunjosum Nyamnichebala, Kunjam Nyamnichebala, and it Deva Kores, Chesada. Deva Rabdu Davi Deva Ure Sech.
Indeed, Dan,
Yeah.
go to Sundate.
And that conjusum, Peru conjusum, that the Karin and Yamne Garjina Warwa, Peru that in conjusum Shigura.
The second means by which to protect the training of the mind from degeneration is that of absolute faith. The absolute faith then comes through knowing the entity, in other words, what the particular training is, to know it clearly. So in terms of the three jewels, knowing the entity or the definition or exactly what is meant by the three jewels, thereby leading to absolute faith.
At the end, that, and then again, Yamlin Jegi, Samba Timbo Kores, Samba Timbo Dina, and then Yamlin Chibi Joat Timbo Kores, Samba Joat Timbo Kores or
Suffering.
Oh.
Being steadfast, this is two expressions. Steadfast both in terms of one's intention and in one's performance. You're steadfast or stable, reliable in terms of one's intention and one's performance.
And then go down. She said, that Rangi, Shika, and Yamne Chibi, Rang the Lamata, and she ran the Gambala Sobata. Then the Chikunjosum La Sobat, Kujepta, and then she said, she said, Chibi, about Dosinik, Geshe, that in the she said the Chibi. 能培养了说把的写赛当规则的级别观点，都写我的是什么多啊？写规的写设计是。
Respectful and as well as polite. This is in terms of how we relate to the three jewels, our teachers, those who are older than us, our elders. That's to speak to and about it, in a manner that is respectful and polite.
当我这些呢，几大节是的，让我这些现在让根真的钱呢，地皮瞧完了呀，那每个瞧完了全部的也是这样，让你的这边啊，那这个你们我把那东啊用过的那那些呢，听你上一课堂看着，那边课堂看着过来，什么的，你这个我们都是让根真的钱呢，地皮切把的全部的也是的，我才写档子，几大是对，他地皮切把那地皮这屋的啦，毛把那东啊我算起来东啊，刚啊的那用过的什么。Denigi some daje, Deniga odati, Tiba Chiban, Tibu Dungan, Betin, Dungan, Pesasere, Sembeke, Denigi, Shena, Tushin, Tibi, Tibu, Telpa, some Tandelia, and Chipu, some Chiba Kitchen, and Tibi Chawal Temple, Esor.
The third one, a sense of shame. This shame, it's a virtuous mind. Shame about that shame serves to refrain the mind from betraying oneself. Shame is a mind that serves to restrain oneself from engaging in non-virtue. And it does so through independence of one's understanding of the Dharma, recognizing that a particular activity or way of speaking or even way of thinking, this is inappropriate because it's not virtuous. Through this virtuous life of shame arising, one refrains from engaging in non-virtue. So this then is a further way to protect the training of the mind from degeneration. And an additional one is that of apprehension. The apprehensive or fearful. This is in relation to the potential karmic or the probable karmic consequences of non-virtue. If one is apprehensive towards non-virtue or fearful towards non-virtue, it refers to being fearful of the suffering karmic results from engaging in non-virtue.
西行现到现个节了，最是的，让你另外个就把西行多是过来，西行多是的，你莫别个另外就把做过没把，你莫个往都马当下去，这些讲了下把那些，他其实是个，但西行多原来的，让个什么拿来，先来判别什么的，讲把的这位什么要把那另外就把西行多，另外的话，在另外就把西行多去，这样呢，的先看起了准，先搞了去吧，先到了那个第一搞不用了，别是学了些的，等到了西行对他呢，先来判别准备教了准备的时候，先来判别准备教去吧呢，得先的先搞去吧，用过话，现在先来判别教去吧，准备也是。
The last two that are being calm. The calm refers to the same way it can be calm or peaceful or pacified. So this refers to a mind that is subdued. Mind that is calm or peaceful or pacifying, subdued, is a mind that has abandoned the afflictions, or is abandoning the afflictions. Because it's the afflictions that stir up the mind and prevent the mind from being peaceful or calm and subdued. But here, by appreciating the benefits of a mind that is not dominated by the affliction, one turns away from the afflictions and thereby pacifies or calms the mind. And the very purpose of that, or the vital one, is so that we can strive to make others happy. Because a calm mind or a peaceful mind is a mind that is not afflicted. But this isn't the final goal, really to have a mind that is at peace. But it's through having a mind that's at peace or non-afflicted that we strive to make others happy, to live with a mind that is wanting to be of benefit to others.
And now, you give our colors and Yamlin Chavin, they don't go, Yabuching ever, Yahaku, and walk or him the more, that's a shing by Shebache. In a yam, Jia, Yamlin Kivich, and Yamin Chevale, Deva Timbo, Deva Jeda. In the end, all the Ligi Deva and Deva Gine, Dene, and Jawa Chivi Kablaya, and she, sorry, Jawa Sambata Jawachi, or the Yamlin Chigins, somebody, somebody Timbuche, then Yan Damsaja signed the other the Jimas, you don't remember somebody Timbuche, and Jawachi begin your Jovi, Yamlin Chibi, Churi, the Joati, Timbuche, to Yamlin Chegores, that the Nichi Galda, Suzuki, Ajig, Divasag, Chicha, member you see what it is that the nigger and was a ship around the needs in the Tigmaris and be around around was a ship. Tony and Jawal Machiata. And nigger or that did what the Nichebana, Divas idea to Mamma the Don Young Chagris and begin. The negative will Shana, Chedan, Dushin, Tibal Semia, was in the Jawan, but Semia. Is that the niggers in the social sem Shishin do watch it. That Shelia, Hembig, so Shending, to watch Shelia. Hembechido, Chinchawachin, Yamlanti Chiorias, want to do nothing but the Tiridua.
We summarize that there's 55th verse, which presents 9 ways to protect the training of one's mind, trainings, generosity, and so forth, from degenerates. First is one needs to develop definite conviction through understanding the various topics, understanding them well, studying, thinking about the meaning, look at them from various angles to understand them well, understand them deeply, so that one doesn't have doubt, one knows precisely how to train one's mind, how to deal with hardships that may arise, and to skillfully transform that, and to develop absolute faith in our ability to transform our mind, our ability to develop these excellent qualities. And this also is aided by faith in qualities called the 3 jewels and so forth. And then a steadfast, thirdly, a steadfast approach, steadfast both in our intention, so our motivation remains determined, not determined, steadfast or stable, unwavering, and then likewise in terms of our performance, not just in the attention, but that one is steadfast in engaging. So there's 2 aspects of being steadfast, both intention and performance. And then fourthly, fourth and fifth, being respectful and polite. So this is in our relation towards others, both towards those one would say are superior to oneself, the 3 jewels, the lama, elders, but polite and respectful towards all, through recognizing that everyone has great qualities, and therefore the way to relate to others is with genuine respect and thereby being polite. Then to refrain from non-virtue, we should rely upon the virtuous mind of shame. Shame, which is a line that prevents us from justified following our afflictions. Recognizing that following an affliction is not justifiable, and it's not in accordance with the kind of person I want to be. And thirdly, apprehension or fear in relation to fear of suffering results, not wanting to experience suffering. Therefore, one is fearful of engaging in non-virtue. So these 2, a sense of shame and apprehension, these serve to protect one from engaging in non-virtue. A calm or a pacified mind. So this is a mind that is at peace, a mind that is not afflicted. And the very purpose of this light and all the others is to strive to make to make others happy. And this is a motivation to cultivate and to have us the motivating force behind all that we do. So by cultivating these 9 points, we will protect the various trainings of our mind that we are engaging in from degenerate.
Thank
Thank you. We can conclude there for tonight. Thank you.